You may have seen this. Has anyone seen this in the snow before? This pattern? Okay, so this is an animal similar to a mouse that stays on top of the ground, chews the grasses in the summertime through the meadows and stuff at the base of the grass. And in the winter time, their trails, as the snow melts, show on top of the ground. And this is a vole. This is a meadow vole, kind of mouse-like, but has a very thick neck and short ears. And it's an herbivore, eats grasses and stuff, and also chews bark on trees. There's some vole sign here where the bark is stripped off this branch. Along those runs, along those paths, you find little latrines and little pantries. Here, the voles have stored some kind of a tuber, some little root, I don't know what it is, but that's a winter food supply that's been exposed after the snow melted. There's other animals like black bear, which is not an animal that we have around here normally. Rare occasions one might wander through, but this is not really bear country. You wouldn't have to go far to find bear though. A little further north or a little further west of here, and you would be in bear country. But bear and chipmunk are animals that are not hibernating technically, but they sleep a lot through the winter. They spend most of the time sleeping. And then there's animals that have to stay active. This is red squirrel, one of the three kinds of squirrels that we have in this area. And they have to find food every day. They have to keep that furnace burning and keeping them warm. Gray squirrel, animal most of us are familiar with. We have red squirrels, and flying squirrels around here. Flying squirrels are pretty common. They're not often seen because they're nocturnal. At night, usually we don't see them. This is red squirrel, more of a squirrel of the forest, if you will. And they have some different food caching behaviors that we'll talk about in a little while. But this is the squirrel that yells at you when you walk through the woods. You know, that screeching, they're protecting their cache of food. They don't want anybody else around. A lot more stuff we could look at, but I know that's a lot of information already. I certainly don't expect you to remember it all. But we can talk as we're out, as we discover things. We'll talk more about what we're seeing. And does anybody have any questions? So before we get started. Okay, let's go. Ah, what a beautiful day. We don't have to go very far before we start seeing stuff. You can see all these acorn shells that are crushed and broken open. Of course, a lot of different animals eat acorns. Oak is one of the more important wildlife foods in the forest. But when you see the shells all broken up into smaller pieces like this, and no meat left, no nut left inside, there's probably gray squirrel that are crushing these things. Deer eat acorns, and they're pretty inefficient in how they chew them. They don't have the hands to hold on to them, so they'll get a mouthful and chew it, and they get some of the nut, but a lot falls right out of their mouth. Reminds me of how my brother used to eat popcorn when we watched the movie. The little crushed shells, probably gray squirrel. That's only one clue. It could be something else. We need to look for more information, and all of the rules in tracking are more guidelines than rules. But you get enough of them on one side, and that's the preponderance of the evidence. You start to say, okay, this really is a bobcat trail or whatever. So let's just head down this way. We're going to head toward the pond. I see some tracks right down here. So why don't we try to stay? This is going to be hard to not step on the tracks, but some folks can stay in the leaves and pine needles that way, and maybe some people can come down onto the stone steps here, and we'll take a look at this. Yeah, so anybody see anything you might recognize? Absolutely. We got cottontail already. So here's two rear feet. And here's two front feet that are almost on top of each other. That's one of the ways that rabbits leave a trail. The other way is more one in front of the other. So here's one. Ooh, can anybody smell red fox? Can you smell a skunky smell?
Yeah.
This is amazing. So that's a scent post. I don't know where it is, but it's right around here. Red fox have urinated on some vegetation here. So one time I was trying to find the fox scent, and I picked up a oak branch with some leaves. You know how the leaves stay on oaks in the winter? And I stuck it in my face, and I get that stuff. I smell like that for 3 days. So I couldn't get rid of it. So what do you think about this? I didn't expect to see this today, really.
Yeah, what was the one that you said was alternate? Heavy in the
That's it. This is raccoon. Yeah, see we got a big rear foot here, and then the rear foot goes to this side. It's harder to tell here, it doesn't quite, but then again, you know, the tracks don't always look like the rules. Another way to tell raccoon also, you see there's a slant to the tracks, one's ahead of the other. If this were a weasel, like a fisher or a short-tailed weasel or something, that pattern would stay the same. That's the animal that puts its rear feet right in the same two prints as the front. This is more of a waddle. It's like the raccoon's doing this. Not as clumsily as me, but it's doing this. And then this goes down, and then this goes like that. So that's the pattern. So my point is that rather than always being the same angle offset, often raccoon tracks go one way and then the other way. But anyway, so much going on here.
How old these are?
Let's just play with that for a while. The snow ended, what, 2 days ago? So we know it wasn't before that. In the last 2 days, the tracks don't have crisp edges. If you make a mark in the snow yourself, it's a good way to gauge. Like, let's say if it was a brand new track, right? It would have really sharp edges. So it doesn't have the sharp edges. It's gone through a little bit of a melting cycle. My guess would be yesterday. They don't look brand new, and we know they were no more than 2 days old. So let's head down. I guess this is probably the easiest way. What I see is a relatively straight line of tracks with a fairly consistent distance between them. And if I were to try to guess where the front of this track used to be, it's about 17 inches step length. That's pretty typical, just about right in the middle for red fox, maybe a little in the high, but that's the red fox range. And here we have a track that's showing right there. Not very distinct. Remember all that hair on the bottom of the foot, so we don't get a nice clear. Sometimes you do, but do you just step just a little to the side so we can get the sun on this? Here's a characteristic of canine tracks that even in a melted out track, a lot of times you'll see. Right in the center of the track, there's a little hill, a little mountain. Can you see that? Yep. That's a space like on a dog's foot where you can put your finger in there. That mounds up like that. So that's a canine characteristic. Could be coyote, could be domestic dog, could be fox. But because of the size of this track, you got roughly less than 3 inches and less than 2 inches wide, or just barely 2. That's in the fox range, and the step length is definitely in the fox range. So you see how the information starts to add up.
Like these three is a different one than these.
I think, yeah. Would you?
Going up and this is coming back.
Yep. Yeah. This is not the same. This is not in the same trail pattern as this. I mean, this is obviously older, had more time to melt out. This is fresher, and it's going in a different direction. We're less than 100 yards from the lodge, and we've already found raccoon and cottontail and red fox scent and trail. You know, and this is only my take on it. It certainly isn't fact, but I think a lot of times if you think in terms of what's the easiest way, what's the least energy way, a lot of times if you walk through the woods, this may have happened to you when you're off trail in the woods and you're walking through the woods, all of a sudden you'll realize you're on a deer trail. It just happens. You know, you take the easiest path just like the deer did, and you're on a deer trail. A lot of their food gets buried under the snow. Yep. The advantage rabbits have is because they're so light, as the snow level rises, they get at higher and higher up food. So sometimes you'll see rabbit browse in the spring or summer that's 3 or 4 feet off the ground. And you say, how could that possibly be? You can identify it as rabbit browse because it has a nice 45-degree diagonal cut, really clean cut, not that rip like a deer. But you say, wow, this was a 3-foot tall rabbit. Whoa. but they were on top of snow, so.
Do snowshoe hares have the same tracks as rabbits?
Larger feet, and they can spread their feet really wide. Yeah. But even closed, same pattern, the same pattern, a lot of the same characteristics, but you're going to see a really large hind foot, often spread really wide, toes really wide. For a snowshoe hare, which we don't have around here, but again, you wouldn't have to go far to find them. A little north or a little west, you would be in territory for moose, bear, and snowshoe hare. Look at that's a little rabbit, little cottontail there, huh? Notice how much bigger this track is than the fox tracks that we were looking at? This sure looks like coyote to me. See how the side toes are tucked in really tightly? It almost makes an oval, or sometimes people call it an arrowhead. Arrowhead shape. That's because the toes are in really tightly. I don't know where to start here. It's like little tiny dots. Some activity here. I'm going to let you guys kind of sort it out. When we're traveling across an area like this where there's a lot of tracks and a lot of people, it's kind of good if we can kind of stay off to the side until you come to something you really want to go look at, rather than just, covering everything up. When you see something interesting, go on. If anybody needs a tape measure, I have some.
Are we getting a good sense for why these animals are traveling across the lake?
He was suggesting earlier that it's easier because it's flatter than like traveling across the terrain. Just less
getting
snow,
point A to point B.
Yeah.
Less to contend with.
Just got my backpack.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Cottontail scat is kind of like a ball, flattened a little bit, as opposed to deer scat, which we haven't found yet, surprisingly. I think it's because maybe the deer are still staying down after the cold, still bedded down. But deer scat is kind of flat or dimpled on one end and pointed on the other, maybe like bullet shaped, you'd say. So they're pretty easy to take tail apart most of the time. The other thing is cottontail scat, you usually find 1 or 2 or 3 together, and deer scat's going to be more like a pile of
That's
scat.
rabbit, right?
This is rabbit.
Yeah.
Every once in a while you get this funny stuff that's like in between though. And unfortunately, the only way to tell,
Oh, you're kidding me. These guys are